After my father, Richard Cole, passed away, my life seemed to split into two unequal halves. On the day the will was read, sitting beside my stepbrother Caleb and my girlfriend Maya, I held my breath, awaiting the words that would define my future. Instead, I heard the lawyer announce that Caleb was the sole owner of my father's thriving Florida construction company, valued at a staggering $1.8 million. When my turn came, the lawyer, nervously adjusting his glasses, declared, "Ethan receives an old cabin in the North Carolina mountains, so dilapidated and forgotten that its value is unlikely to exceed $50,000. Caleb leaned back in his chair, giving me the same smug grin he'd displayed my entire life. For him, it was another confirmation that he was the favored son, the one my father believed in unconditionally. For me, it sounded like the ultimate rejection from a man whose approval I had desperately sought for years. On the drive home, Maya, arms crossed, turned to the window, then sharply faced me, uttering words that cut deeper than any of Caleb's barbs. "You're a loser, Ethan. You got a dump. Caleb got a profitable business, and you, rotting boards in the middle of nowhere. Do you even see the difference?" I swallowed hard, struggling to find words of defense, but deep down, I knew her words only echoed my own fears. For years, I had lived in Caleb's shadow, constantly wondering if I would ever truly matter in this family. Now it seemed my father had given his final answer, stripping me of all hope. However, neither of them suspected one thing. This worthless cabin, lost in the mountains, held something that could turn everything upside down. The very day I crossed its threshold, I discovered something so stunning and valuable that it would not only change my life forever, but also prove that everyone who doubted me was profoundly mistaken. Inside that old cabin was a secret valued at $100 million. After Richard Cole's passing, I lost not only a father, but also the hope of ever hearing those long-awaited words, "I'm proud of you." From childhood, I watched him, brick by brick, build his construction empire in Florida, pouring all his energy into developing the company and raising my stepbrother Caleb. I was the quiet and overlooked son, remaining with my mother after their divorce. My father visited on holidays and birthdays, but even then, his attention seemed distracted and incomplete. When he looked at Caleb, his eyes sparkled with pride. When he looked at me, it was as if he saw a complete stranger. My mother, Linda, did everything she could to fill the void. She was a quiet but strong woman who worked double shifts at a diner to pay the bills, yet always found time to ask about my day. She assured me I was good enough, even when I felt invisible in my father's shadow. Still, deep down, I continued to reach out to a man who never truly reached back. The only person in my family who gave me a sense of belonging was my grandfather, Henry. He was a true mountain man, a retired logger who had lived his entire life near the Blue Ridge Mountains. When I was little, he told me captivating stories about that old cabin. He described how our ancestors built it over a century ago, how it served as a shelter for hunters in winter, and a place where families gathered by wood-burning stoves during blizzards. He said that this cabin held the legacy of the Cole family in a way a construction company never could. "This land remembers us, Ethan," he once told me, squeezing my hands with his calloused palms. "One day, you'll understand that roots mean far more than riches." At the time, I saw these words as beautiful but hollow phrases from an old man who never knew what money was. Caleb, on the other hand, grew up with privilege and luxury. He lived with my father and enjoyed all the advantages his position afforded. He attended prestigious private schools, received a lavish truck for his 16th birthday, and completed internships at the construction company that allowed him into boardrooms before he even turned 20. My Uncle Paul, my father's business partner, treated him like a second son, teaching him the intricacies of contracts and deals. I watched all of this from afar, feeling like an outsider. I never harbored open hatred for Caleb, but I hated what he represented, a world where I could never measure up. When the will was read, Ethan's world collapsed overnight. He vividly remembered the sterile atmosphere of the lawyer's office. His brother Caleb, in an impeccable suit, exuded confidence and smugness. His girlfriend Maya, witty and beautiful, quietly commented on the proceedings. His mother, with quiet anxiety in her eyes, sat with folded hands. The lawyer's words came like a thunderclap. Caleb inherited the prosperous Cole construction company, valued at $1.8 million. Then it was Ethan's turn. He received only a cabin in North Carolina, an old, dilapidated structure lost in the wilderness. His heart ached with resentment, but he tried to maintain a composed demeanor. Caleb seemed to gloat as if fate itself had confirmed his superiority. Later that night, the full weight of the situation crashed down on him. Maya made no secret of her disappointment. She declared his inheritance humiliating, saying that while Caleb would manage a $1 million business, he would merely languish in some hovel. She sarcastically asked if he planned to become a logger. Her words cut deeper than he wanted to admit. He had hoped she would be his support, someone who believed in him even when the whole world doubted. Instead, she only confirmed his worst fears, that he was merely a loser. He wanted to argue, to say that the cabin might have hidden value, that his father might have seen something in him that he didn't notice in Caleb. But the words caught in his throat. He felt helpless and insignificant. A sleepless night was filled with bitter contemplation. Moments resurfaced in his memory, his father favoring Caleb, missing his sports games, barely glancing at his school reports, and paying more attention to Caleb's stories about construction deals at holiday dinners. The cabin seemed like the final straw, a symbol that even after death, his father considered him less worthy. But then another thought emerged, quieter but persistent. He remembered his grandfather's words, "Roots are more important than wealth." Perhaps there was something in the cabin that his father wanted him to see. Or was it truly just a useless piece of land, meant for him so Caleb could have everything else? Tormenting questions plagued him until he made a decision. He would go to North Carolina and personally inspect the cabin. If it proved worthless, he would sell it and take the proceeds. If there was something more to it, then perhaps he would understand what his grandfather had meant. Either way, he needed to figure this out. As he packed his things, he didn't realize he was leaving behind not only the girlfriend who had lost faith in him, but also the part of himself that had always yearned for his father's approval. Something awaited him that would change his life and overturn all his notions of his family's legacy. The drive to North Carolina felt endless. He loaded a duffel bag, a cooler with water, and the papers confirming his ownership of the cabin into his old truck. Maya stood on the porch, arms crossed, without a word of goodbye. Her last words echoed in his head. "You're wasting your time, Ethan. No one wants that rundown shack. Sell it and move on. Or are you too stubborn to admit that Caleb got lucky?" She made her stance clear. In her eyes, he was nothing compared to Caleb, a loser, doomed to always be second best. The stinging pain of her words intensified with every mile that separated him from home. The highway ribbon, stretching northward, unspooled a canvas of changing landscapes before me, where Florida's flat expanses gave way to rolling hills covered in dense forests. With each mile I covered, I desperately tried to quiet the swarm of questions tormenting my mind. Why had my father left this old cabin specifically to me? Was it dictated by pity, a form of punishment, or did it hide something entirely different? Caleb basked in the glow of success, surrounded by family respect and possessing substantial capital. And what did I get? A dilapidated log cabin lost in the mountain wilderness. Clutching the steering wheel tighter, I felt anger simmer in my chest, and my memory mercilessly brought forth painful recollections. Thanksgiving dinners resurfaced in my memory, where Caleb would enthusiastically recount his multi-million-dollar deals, listened to indulgently by my father. I recalled my timid attempts to share my passions, my love for books, my literary endeavors, the modest earnings I used to help my mother, and how I was invariably met with my father's indifferent, glazed-over gaze. Over time, I learned to be silent, trying to take up as little space as possible. Such was my role in this family drama, and the inheritance I received only confirmed this bitter realization. Stopping at a rest stop, I sat motionless in my truck's cabin, gazing at the vending machines flickering under the cold fluorescent lights. A treacherous thought crept into my mind, one I tried desperately to push away. Maybe Maya was right. Maybe I was clinging to something utterly worthless, driven only by false pride. Selling the cabin seemed like a quick and easy solution. With $50,000, I could finally break free from the shadow of my father's decisions and start fresh. It wouldn't make me rich, but at least it would offer a chance for a new beginning. This thought brought a moment of much-needed relief, But then my grandfather's voice clearly resonated in my mind, as if he were sitting beside me. Roots are worth more than any riches. That phrase haunted me throughout the journey. My grandfather believed the cabin was more than just a log structure. He spoke of it with a special reverence, as if it held the spirit of our family. I remember one evening, as a boy, sitting by the fireplace and listening to his stories about how the Coles built this cabin. "Your great-great-grandfather cut these logs himself," he'd say with pride in his voice. "He built a home strong enough to withstand any storms, wars, and harsh winters that would break others. This cabin is living proof that we come from something unyielding." I wanted to believe those words, but the bitterness and resentment accumulated in my soul were stronger. If the cabin held such immense significance, why had my father never wanted to spend even a single weekend there with me? Why did Caleb get a prosperous company, while I received only a symbol that seemed to interest no one but my grandfather? My chest tightened with resentment, but deep down, a flicker of curiosity I couldn't extinguish still glowed. As I approached the Blue Ridge Mountains, the road narrowed and began to snake. Tall pines lined the roadside, casting eerie shadows on the asphalt. The air grew cooler, filled with the sharp scent of earth and pine needles. The local landscapes were pleasing to the eye, but I was too engrossed in my dark thoughts to fully appreciate the beauty. The scene of my breakup with Maya, her harsh words, her cold gaze, replayed constantly in my mind. "You're a loser, Ethan." That phrase felt like it broke something inside me. I had loved her for 3 years, naively believing she saw something special in me. Now, I understood that she had been comparing me to Caleb all along, and I had failed her silent test. Stopping at a gas station near a small, mountain-hidden town, I felt the curious glances from locals, clearly far removed from the hustle and bustle of Florida's coastal cities. Buying coffee inside, I inadvertently caught my reflection in the window. Before me stood a haggard man, carrying the weight of years of disappointment on his shoulders. For the first time, the thought crept into my mind, would Maya even be waiting for my return? Back on the road, I felt the cabin drawing inexorably closer. My heart pounded in my chest as I climbed higher into the mountains. With each turn, I imagined Caleb sitting in a comfortable office chair, likely celebrating his appointment as head of coal construction. He would never spare a thought for me or the old cabin. For him, it was beneath his notice, a meager inheritance given to a loser to keep him from bothering the successful. Bitterness and resentment simmered within, gradually transforming into something else, determination. I swore to myself that I would not let this cabin break me. If it was truly useless, I would prove it by selling it and moving on. If some value was hidden within it, I would surely find it. Either way, I would not return to Maya or Caleb the same man who left Florida. After the long drive, leaving the sunny confines of Florida, the last miles of the journey transformed into a winding obstacle course of dirt roads and shady thickets, where only the headlights pierced through the dense foliage. And then, finally, the silhouette of that very cabin, nestled on the hillside about which my grandfather had told so many stories, appeared. His heart involuntarily tightened with apprehension. It was exactly as described, weather-beaten, yet retaining its former grandeur, like a living page of history that had stoically withstood the test of time. In that very moment, a strange, unexpected feeling arose. It wasn't fear of the cabin itself, but rather a fear of what it might represent. What if Maya's words proved true? What if his father had been right in his suspicions? What if beyond the threshold awaited only confirmation that one received scraps, while the other got all the gold in the world? He stopped the truck, killed the engine, and a ringing silence descended. The cool mountain air touched his skin, and the forest filled with a symphony of crickets. Every nerve was on edge as his gaze fixed on the front door. "Tomorrow I will cross the threshold," he thought. "Tomorrow I will find out if this cabin is truly just an old run-down shack, or if my grandfather's words held a meaning I had yet to grasp." Waking at dawn in the cramped truck cabin, his back ached from a sleepless night. The cabin, like a silent sentinel, stood just meters away, steeped in silence and stillness, as if it had awaited this moment for years. The roof sagged in places under the weight of time, paint peeled from the shutters, and the porch steps looked fragile and uncertain. Yet, despite all signs of decay, there was something dignified, almost defiant in its appearance. Stepping out of the truck, the morning air bit with cold, filling his lungs with the pungent scent of pine and damp earth. Standing before the cabin, an involuntary sense of apprehension arose. This was the moment he had both feared and anticipated since the will was read. His hand reached for the wooden door, feeling its rough surface, weathered by wind and rain. His father's voice echoed in his head, not so much in words, but in their absence. Caleb got his empire, and he got this. Was it a final act of rejection, or was there something else to it? Pushing the door, the hinges let out a mournful creak, as if protesting the intrusion after long neglect. A wave of dust hit his face. Sunbeams, filtering through gaps in the shutters, illuminated a space frozen in time. The smell of wood smoke and old earth hung in the air. Every step on the floorboards echoed with a creak, stirring up clouds of dust and memories. At first glance, the cabin looked exactly as Maya had described, utterly worthless. Old furniture, a leaking roof in one corner, cobwebs draped thickly over the rafters. His heart sank with disappointment. She would surely have laughed if she saw this. Caleb would have sneered contemptuously, finding it perfectly predictable. He was almost turning to leave, with the intention of finding a realtor as soon as possible and putting the cabin up for sale, when something suddenly stopped him. It was the fireplace. It was the fireplace, often the starting point of his grandfather's stories. He had said that every stone for the fireplace had been brought from the riverbed and laid by hand. Kneeling, he ran his hand over the stones, brushing away dust and ash untouched for years. His fingers traced the rough surface until they found something unusual. One of the hearthstones protruded slightly from the others, as if placed there deliberately. Pressing lightly, the stone yielded, shifting from its position. Beneath it, hidden from plain sight, a small iron latch was revealed. His pulse quickened as he pulled it. The latch sprang open with a sharp metallic click, the sound echoing through the cabin like a secret finally broken free. Stepping back, he watched as a section of the floor in front of the fireplace lifted. With effort, he raised it, revealing a dark, narrow passage leading down into the earth. A chill ran down his spine. This was clearly not an ordinary cellar. His grandfather had never mentioned it. His father had never brought him here. Freezing for a moment, his gaze plunged into the dark abyss. Fear gripped his body, but curiosity was stronger. His whole life had seemed to say that he was just the younger son, forgotten and deprived, content with scraps from another's table. And now, here, in this cabin, something hidden was found, something meant to be discovered. Grabbing the lantern hanging by the door and surprisingly finding its wick still usable, a warm glow spread across the cabin walls. Carefully stepping onto the first rung of the ladder, it creaked under his weight but held. Each step echoed in the silence, carrying him deeper into the unknown. Below, the air grew noticeably cooler. The cellar was larger than he'd anticipated, its walls lined with old wooden beams. Clouds of dust swirled in the lantern's light. In the center of the room stood several wooden boxes stacked neatly, as if arranged with great care. Some were small, others almost coffin-sized. On them were signs he couldn't decipher, faded symbols, branded into the wood. Setting the lantern on one of the boxes, he knelt to examine it more closely. The wood was old but sturdy. His hands trembled as he pried open the lid with a rusty crowbar he found by the wall. The nails groaned and resisted, slowly pulling from the wood until the lid finally gave way. It didn't give up easily. Inside, he didn't find moldy paintings or broken tools as he had half expected, but a collection of items, carefully shrouded in linen cloths. Reaching in, he gently unrolled one. His breath caught at the sight of vibrant colors. It was a painting, untouched by time and seemingly glowing, with vibrant brushstrokes, despite the dim lantern light. He didn't immediately recognize the artist's name, but his instinct told him this was something important, valuable, eclipsing anything he had ever held. Beneath it were other works, neatly stacked and protected by fabric. In another box he discovered something different, leather-bound books, with gold tooling on their spines and gilded page edges. Opening one, his gaze caught on a signature inside. Historical documents, perhaps a century old, preserved in perfect condition. The next box held small wooden boxes filled with coins. Picking one up, he felt the weight of metal glinting in the lantern light, gold, real and undeniable. His hands trembled as he returned the coin, his heart pounding with the realization of what he was seeing. This wasn't junk, nor was it scraps. This was treasure. The collection was so vast and rare that comprehending its value felt overwhelming. Dropping to the ground, he was overwhelmed with shock. His father had left Caleb a company, a fortune built with sweat and blood through contracts. But he had received this cabin, holding a secret wealth no one had ever mentioned. Questions swirled in his mind. Did his father know about this, his grandfather, or had the secret been buried so long that he was meant to discover it alone? Surrounded by boxes whispering of unimaginable wealth, one truth asserted itself. The inheritance wasn't worthless. It was a test, a legacy hidden in plain sight, waiting for a son willing to look deeper. His heart tightened, but not from anger, from something new, from unfolding possibilities. Climbing the ladder and closing the secret door behind him, the cabin no longer seemed a burden. It had become a gateway to something far greater than he could have imagined. For the first time in his life, he felt chosen. On the floor of the secret cellar, time seemed to stand still. The lantern light flickered over treasures that seemed destined for museum walls. His hands trembled as he touched each box, as if fearing they would vanish if he blinked too long. Since childhood, he had been told he was the son who inherited nothing of value. And now, before his eyes, lay a fortune capable of changing the course of several generations. The painting, unrolled earlier, drew his gaze. Rich, almost luminous colors, vibrant brushstrokes, full of detail and emotion. Carefully setting it aside, he opened another canvas shrouded in linen. His breath caught again. In the corner, a small signature stood out, recognizable even without an art history degree. It was a name encountered in history books, associated with works adorning world-renowned galleries. If this was an authentic piece, and everything within him screamed that it was, then he held a masterpiece worth millions. Leaning back, his knees buckled. His father had left Caleb a company everyone could see and admire, but this was different. This was a secret, hidden beneath the floorboards, entrusted only to him. His heart swelled with emotions difficult to define. Pride, anger, disbelief, and awe intertwined. He opened another box, filled with leather-bound books. The covers were worn but sturdy, the spines adorned with gold embossing. Inside, he found documents signed by names he only knew from school history books, land deeds, letters, and contracts dating back over a century. Some were directly related to the early history of the Appalachian region. These weren't just artifacts. These were fragments of American history, preserved and awaiting their moment. He felt the weight of responsibility. This wasn't only money. This was a legacy. The family cabin was not merely a refuge. It was a safe, a time capsule, a treasure trove hidden from the world until the right moment. In that very moment, as his fingers touched the last box, an inexplicable thrill overcame him, causing his hands to tremble involuntarily. Inside, like precious treasures, lay intricately crafted wooden boxes, each carefully holding coins whose gleam resembled sunbeams, forever etched in metal. He gently lifted one, studying the finest details skillfully engraved on its surface. The gold coins, seemingly untouched by time, possessed not only monetary but also immense historical value. Pouring a few coins into his palm, he felt their impressive weight, which astonished him to his core. Dropping to the floor, surrounded by boxes filled with paintings, coins, and documents, he felt his mind fill with endless possibilities. Is this worth hundreds of thousands, or even millions? He wondered. The scale of the discovery seemed unfathomable, but his intuition told him this collection was unparalleled. The next morning, carefully wrapping one of the smaller paintings in a soft blanket, he set off for town. His destination was a local antique appraiser, an elderly man named Gerald, who had dedicated his life to art and history. When he unrolled the canvas in the appraiser's modest office, Gerald's eyes instantly widened in astonishment. Approaching the painting, he adjusted his glasses and looked at Ethan with an expression combining shock and reverence. "Do you realize what you have here?" he asked, his voice trembling. Ethan swallowed hard, replying, "Not entirely. Just tell me, is it real?" Gerald slowly nodded. His fingers gently touched the signature, careful not to damage the paint. "It's an authentic piece, the work of one of the greatest masters. At the right auction, it could fetch several $1 million. And if this is part of a collection, then, my friend, you might be sitting on a fortune beyond your wildest imagination." At that moment, the world around him seemed to spin. He grabbed the edge of the desk to steady himself. "What kind of figures are we talking about?" he asked, holding his breath. Gerald exhaled. "If you have other similar pieces, as well as documents and artifacts, you could be looking at well over $100 million, possibly more. This isn't just an inheritance, it's a discovery, it's history." 100 million. The words echoed in his ears, drowning out all the resentments inflicted by Caleb and Maya. His father had left Caleb the company, but what he had received surpassed it many times over. Leaving Gerald's office, with the carefully wrapped painting, he felt his heart pounding wildly in his chest. On the drive back to the cabin, a wave of emotions washed over him. He remembered the smug Caleb, confident in his victory. He remembered Maya, whose voice had dismissively called him the heir to junk. And of course, he thought of his father, the man who had spent his life building magnificent skyscrapers of glass and steel, yet had left him only a humble cabin, holding secrets hidden in wood and stone. Stopping his truck in front of the cabin, he looked at it with new eyes. What had once seemed a worthless shack now exuded strength and significance. Whispering aloud, as if his father could hear him, he asked, "Was this your plan all along? Did you know about this, or did you trust that I was the one meant to find it?" The mountain's silence offered no answer, only the incessant chirping of crickets and the rustle of leaves disturbing the peace. But he felt a certain strength awaken within him, one he hadn't known he possessed. For the first time in his life, he felt no shame for what he had received. For the first time, he realized that his inheritance held something more than just money. It was history, resilience, and truth. Closing the cabin door for the night, locking away the treasures hidden beneath its floorboards, he understood that his life had changed forever. He was no longer the forgotten son, the loser who inherited junk. He had become the guardian of a legacy whose value surpassed any company and couldn't be measured in monetary terms alone. After his discovery, he felt as if he were living in a dream. He contacted experts, historians, and curators who confirmed Gerald's words. The paintings were authentic, the documents historical, and the coins priceless. Each new appraisal pushed the total value of the collection higher until it exceeded $100 million. He felt dizzy every time he heard that figure. All his life, he had felt like the forgotten son, and now he possessed a vast fortune capable of rewriting his future. The future had arrived, and news of the impending changes spread like wildfire. Maya, whose voice had once been as cold as ice, was the first to break the silence. Her words now dripped with undisguised sweetness. "Ethan, I've rethought a lot," she cooed. "I underestimated your cabin, failed to see its true worth. You were always smarter than people gave you credit for. I should have listened to you. Maybe we can give our relationship a second chance." For years he had longed for her recognition, like a thirsty traveler in the desert. But now, listening to her words, he felt only cold clarity. She didn't love him for who he was, but for what he could give her: wealth, social standing, everything Caleb represented. As soon as she decided he had nothing to offer, she turned away. And now, when opportunity beckoned before him, she wanted to return. He held a heavy silence before answering. "You didn't believe in me when it mattered," he said, articulating each word clearly. "You called me a loser, made me feel worthless. I don't need you anymore." Ethan hung up the phone. His hand trembled, not from fear, but from the weight that had finally lifted from his shoulders. For the first time in years, he felt free. Soon after, Caleb's polished black truck roared onto the gravel driveway, his tie loosely undone, as if he'd rushed straight from the office. He jumped out, his face flushed with anger and astonishment. "What's going on here, Ethan?" he demanded, making no effort to hide his irritation. "Rumors are flying around town that you found something valuable in the cabin, something worth millions. Do you think that belongs to you? Father built all of this for both of us, the company, the reputation. It should be divided equally." Ethan stood on the porch, the cabin door behind him, and looked at his brother as he never had before. For years he had seen him as something more than just a man, the chosen one, Father's favorite. Now, Caleb seemed pathetic, desperate, clinging to something that wasn't his. "Father gave you the company," Ethan replied calmly. "You have everything you ever dreamed of. This is mine. It was left to me and I found it. You get nothing." Caleb's face contorted with rage. "Do you think you're better than me? Do you think you're more significant because of some old junk hidden in the floor?" Ethan took a step forward, his voice steady and assured. "This isn't junk. This is history. It's proof that I was never useless. You spent your life building towers of glass and steel, but this is what will endure for centuries. Perhaps Father didn't see it, but maybe he wanted me to see it. Perhaps he knew that I was the one who could understand its true meaning." For the first time, Caleb had no retort. He shot his brother a scathing glare, clenched his fists, then spun abruptly and strode to his truck. Gravel sprayed from under the tires as he sped away. Watching him go, Ethan felt neither anger nor gloating, only relief. His father's shadow no longer loomed over him. Weeks flew by in a flurry of activity as Ethan worked with experts to preserve the unique collection. Some items went to museums, others joined private collections, and each discovery etched his family's name into history. Journalists besieged him with calls, tempting offers poured in, but Ethan kept the cabin, turning it into his steadfast anchor. He repaired the roof, updated the porch, and filled the rooms with warmth and comfort. The cellar remained untouched, a reminder of the pivotal moment when everything changed. One evening, as the sun slowly set behind the Blue Ridge Mountains and the cabin was bathed in a soft golden light, Ethan sat on the porch beside his mother. She slowly sipped her tea, her eyes glowing with pride. "Your grandfather was right," she said quietly. "Roots are more valuable than riches. This cabin was always meant for you." Ethan nodded. Her words resonated deeply within him. For the first time, he realized that all those years he had felt deprived, he had been wrong. It wasn't a coincidence, but a true gift he had almost missed. His mother gently took his hand. "Your father may not have said it aloud, but I think he showed it in his own way. He left Caleb the company because Caleb wanted it, but he left you something more, a chance to prove to yourself that you were always worthy." Her words filled the quiet of the warm summer night. Ethan thought of the boy he once was, one who craved recognition, who allowed Caleb and Maya to define his worth. That boy no longer existed. In his place stood a man who had discovered not only a treasure, but also his own strength. As the last rays of sun faded, he looked at the mountains and felt the world seem to embrace him. The cabin was no longer a burden. It had become his home, his legacy, his proof that value isn't always measured by money or approval. Sometimes it's hidden in places no one thinks to look. And sitting there, Ethan realized one simple truth. What others had called junk had become his priceless treasure. Not just in a material sense, but in the legacy it carried and the man it had allowed him to become. That day, he finally understood that what others considered worthless could turn out to be the most valuable. His father's final gift wasn't just about money. It was about finding his own strength, his place in life, and realizing he was never the forgotten son. He was the one chosen to carry the true legacy.